Hi, my name is Matt Hughes, and I'm the Revenue Optimization Global Analytics Manager for the Carlson Rezidor Hotel Group. So my background is in hotel operations and revenue management. Today we're going to be talking about the journey that we took at Carlson Rezidor from the old way that we were doing things and the new, more data-driven way that we're doing things now. My contact information is right here. So while I have this up, let's talk a little bit about what I do now at the company. So my job title is long, but essentially I use our data to perform brand-wide analysis for revenue optimization opportunity. This sometimes leaks over into operations, marketing, and loyalty analysis. The largest part of my job is helping other analysts at the company make better use of our data. Often this means building and helping them use dashboards in Tableau. It also means helping them use Tableau for ad hoc analysis. Today, we'll talk about our story here at the Carlson Rezidor Hotel Group. I'm sure it's a story that a lot of you can relate to. It's about our transition from our old world of flat files, heavily restricted access to data, and reactive analysis to where we are now, and the very large role that Tableau played in that transition. I'll talk a little about who we are, what revenue optimization means for us, where we were before, our Tableau implementation and results, and what the opportunity is next, both for us and what we see in the entire hotel industry. So the Carlson family of companies has a hotel division, a restaurant division, and a travel management division. Today we'll be focusing on the hotel group. The Carlson Rezidor Hotel Group has more than 1,300 hotels in more than 100 countries and territories. Within the hotel division, we have 6 hotel brands. Here you can see the different brands. Country Inn & Suites in Radisson have the largest presence in the Americas, while Park Inn, Radisson Blu, and Hotel Missoni are present in other theaters. Before we dive too far into this, for the sake of clarity, I want to take a brief moment to talk about the relationship between a hotel brand and individual hotels, as you'll find that this will impact a large part of the presentation later on. Most hotels, especially in the mid-scale and upper mid-scale segments, are franchise businesses. So the hotel brand will franchise the hotels to individual operators or to management or ownership companies. It's not uncommon for a hotel brand to work with a large number of management companies or hotels. It's also not uncommon for a management company to have multiple hotels, all from different brands. So what we'll find today is this leads to a unique dynamic as we work to influence business decisions in our franchise hotels. So now let's talk a little bit about revenue optimization and what it means for us. So revenue optimization consists of a huge number of related parts. There's forecasting, pricing, inventory management, marketing, channel management, and a lot of other elements. But what all of these parts ultimately lead to is this. We want to be selling the right product to the right person at the right time for the right price. So let's talk a little bit about some of the factors about our business and other businesses that make this so important. So with revenue management, as a business practice and as a way of growing profits, the airlines really pioneered the concept. They recognized that there were unique elements to their business that made revenue management essential. They had perishable inventory with high fixed costs. So in other words, once a flight left the ground, any unused seat was essentially expired inventory. They had a high percentage of their bookings coming in advance, and they experienced very seasonal supply and demand. So all of these things together meant that they could increase profit through increased management of pricing and inventory. So what happened after success with their principles became widely known was that hotels started to follow suit. Because hotels experience all of the above traits, and we could apply it to our business model, but there were added complications for hotels. So the first complication is a fixed capacity. So for example, if your flight from Denver to Dallas is forecasted to be empty, you can switch out the 767 with something smaller and lighter with less seats. In the hotel world, we can't add or subtract capacity, so we have to work around that. Additionally, there are variable lengths of stay, increasing supply over the past several years, and increasing pricing transparency as potential guests have made more and more use of better pricing information online. Examples of that would be Kayak, Bing Travel, or Google Hotel Finder. But probably the most impactful difference between the two worlds is the franchise environment. This is something that we'll speak to quite a bit today. But the example here is that when Delta wants to make pricing or inventory changes and the analysis backs it up, It's then just a matter of finding ways to implement that change. In the hotel world, it's often the case that not only do we need to be able to do the analysis, but we then have to influence a large group of stakeholders, such as the hotel owner, a management company, or a local hotel manager to implement the change. So for us, we needed to not just perform the analysis that leads to business decisions, but we also need to be able to present that analysis and recommendations to a variety of people in a way that is convincing and transparent. So now that we've gone through the introduction to the world we're in, let's talk about how this actually works operationally. When it comes to working with franchise hotels, we have two main groups of revenue managers. The first group is a revenue management for hire group. This is in this case, a franchise hotel can actually choose to pay for this program in lieu of hiring their own revenue management staff. Each manager works with 10 to 12 hotels. They have weekly meetings with each hotel, and they also action any and all revenue management related tasks such as changing rates, managing inventory, and things like that. Now, the other team is the revenue support team. They work with all of the other hotels that don't participate in the revenue management for hire program. They have between 70 and 100 hotels per revenue manager. Traditionally, they've been limited in scope, and they provide guidance as hotels ask for it, and would typically only provide broad analysis and recommendations to a hotel 2 or 3 times per year. So that brings us to the goal that we had at the beginning of 2011 at the Carlson Rezidor Hotel Group. We wanted to take the support level that we were giving to franchise hotels that pay for the revenue management for hire program, and we wanted to expand that for all of our franchise hotels, whether they were paying for the revenue program or not. And then, of course, we wanted to take the for hire program and raise it up to a more in-depth level that added more value for the franchisees. So we started the process in mid-2011, and so let's review what we did from a data point of view to make that happen. So back in 2011, our analysis for all revenue managers was very much driven by Excel and Access. We had a data mart of sorts. You could say that the data mart wasn't exactly blessed by IT. I'm not even 100% sure that they knew about it at first, but it was several Oracle tables that were updated on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on the table. There was direct access to the data for a very select few, quite literally 2 or 3 people. They would run ad hoc queries as needed. Everyone else had access to the data tables using internally built Microsoft Access tools that would link to the data. We also had lots of one-off Excel workbooks that would be used for ad hoc questions. And then what we would find is most people would find them useful, and so they would end up sticking around and being used over and over again, which meant also more things to update manually. There was some automation, but there was very little of it. This is a situation that we later found isn't too different at all from what a lot of other organizations go through. But this did lead to a horrible ratio of time spent taking data and formatting it compared to actually analyzing it and making business decisions. So we did a time study of our revenue managers, and we saw that for a given single hotel analysis, they'd spent about half of their time pulling the raw data and formatting it into charts or other views, and then they'd spend the remaining half actually analyzing the situation and either making recommendations or making changes. This obviously wasn't ideal, but it was still sustainable for our managers that worked with 10 to 12 hotels at a time. It was definitely, though, a non-starter for the team that worked with 70 to 100 hotels. They could provide the analysis, but only 2 or 3 times per year per hotel. So in addition to the time issues, we saw other issues. Partly due to the widespread, opaque way that the tools were organized, it led to very fragmented results and inconsistent recommendations. And that was just the inefficiencies we were experiencing for doing analysis for one hotel at a time. The reality was we needed to be able to do more than that. We needed to be able to do the same analysis for groups and regions of hotels, but all of our tools are limited to one hotel at a time. If individual hotel analysis was painful, widespread analysis was even worse, if not almost impossible to perform on a regular basis. So let's take a basic type of analysis that is a real-world example of something the team did about 2 months after I started at Carlson. We wanted to know which hotels were seeing revenue losses from certain booking channels. Then we wanted to prioritize the hotels based on other factors. Because we wanted to prioritize the hotels relative to others, it meant looking at each hotel individually. So every hotel, every time we wanted to look at this. Personally, I had 110 hotels in my set when we were doing this. So let's see how that actually worked out for me. 15 minutes per hotel to pull the data and record it somewhere, multiplied by 110 hotels, led to 27 hours just to get started. And of course, take that 27 hours and multiply it by each of the revenue managers, and it's a lot of wasted time just to pull the data to start the analysis. Of course, there was a better way to do this, but we didn't have access at the time. Now, just as a side note and a preview for what's more to come here, we now have the same exact information in a dashboard that is updated automatically every night, and revenue managers can use it as often as they want. But what we're seeing now is a pretty good illustration of where we were in 2011. So let's take a look at some of the first steps we made in the right direction. A huge step was that we got department-wide access to the Rogue Data Mart. It did lead us to build a set of pre-made Excel reports that could then be updated by a single user for the entire group. So here's an example of what one of those looked like. It reduced the report building time from the individual users to something much smaller than before, but it still didn't help with the widespread analysis that we needed to do. And in addition, we also found that we weren't really equipped with the right tools to handle that large scale of data, or at least relatively large compared to what we'd used before. Also, the pre-built workbooks were great, but they also required a significant amount of resources to keep them up to date. So at this time, we just had 2 of those pre-built reports, and we only updated them every 2 weeks. There was demand for more reports updated more often, but that was what we were limited to based on the available resources. And of course, there was a classic cycle that we saw over and over again. Access to more data led to the revenue managers asking even better, more complicated questions, and then needing more detailed data to answer those new questions. We definitely didn't view this as a problem, but we did quickly recognize that the current cycle wasn't sustainable to get where we wanted to be. So, in the latter half of 2012, we phased out or started to phase out that Rogue Data Mart. We worked with IT to build data marts that serve the same function. All users were given access via web interface. The output was raw rows and columns, and to say that the user adoption was low would be an understatement. So what we found was that even though the data was more detailed than what they had before, and it was easier to access, we quickly found out that even with extensive training, a large amount of users weren't adopting this new data they had access to. So this is when we discovered Tableau Desktop. I can actually still remember the circumstances that led to us finding it. It was time to update the pre-built Excel reports, and there was a VBA-related issue that we were trying to work through. So we kept on thinking that there had to be a better way to do this. We Googled automatic dashboards, and there were all of the results that you would expect. But near the top, there was Tableau and a ton of video tutorials on their page. So we watched a few to try to find out if using the software was really as easy and as straightforward as a sales pitch made it seem. I'm sure you can guess how that ended. A little bit later, I had the trial version, and with the dashboards I was able to build during the 14-day trial period, I had enough value shown that it was an easy approval to buy a couple licenses. In fact, the meeting to request approval was scheduled for 30 minutes. We spent about 10 minutes getting the initial approval, and then the next hour or so going through some of the great dashboards that we already had started to use. So we took the route that we later found out was pretty common: 1 or 2 desktop licenses and a lot of people downloading Reader. We were able to solve a large amount of our existing issues. We were able to analyze huge sets of hotels at once. We were able to use exception-based reporting to quickly zero in on hotels that needed proactive recommendations instead of having to look through every hotel every time. And the reports we built for hotels were so loved that they had staff members at the hotels calling and asking for them on a weekly basis. And best of all, at least for me, we could significantly reduce resources needed to update the tools. Of course, that didn't lead to more extra time. Instead, we took the time we spent before and expanded from 2 pre-built reports updated every 2 weeks for a total of 4 updates a month to 10 Tableau dashboards updated weekly for a total of 40 updates a month. So a 10, multiplying 10 improvement there. So at this time, we actually do have a couple live examples of some of the broad scale tools that we had. So the first one that I'm going to show you here is one that we used for what we refer to as rate yielding. By rate yielding, I mean that what we would do is we would analyze how hotels are opening or closing discounts that are available to the general public to buy. So by that I mean a discount could be a rate code that's available on something like Priceline or Hotwire, or it could be an advanced purchase discount, or something with a smaller discount as AAA. So in this view, on the left-hand side, you can see a scatter plot. The vertical axis is projected demand for a given stay date for a given hotel. So by projected demand, we mean at 100% the hotel was projected to be sold out, and anything above 100% they are projected to sell out and turn away potential guests that want to stay with them. The horizontal axis in this case represents a numerical score that rates how aggressively the hotel is yielding out discounts. So in this case, the further they are to the right-hand side of the scatter plot, the more discounts they're closing out and the more discounts they're closing out to the public. So in this case, each circle represents one stay date for one hotel. So what this means is that one individual dot here would be a relatively low demand date with a relatively high number of rate codes closed out. So while this is a fairly simple view, this was a groundbreaking change for the revenue managers that use this. Prior to this, if they wanted to evaluate which of their hotels might be either closing out too many discounts or maybe not closing out enough discounts, they would have to access the databases to find the automated forecast data, and then they would have to go into a separate application and see what the hotel has actually closed out by dates, and then try to match that up in a way that makes sense. And of course, they would have to do that separately for each hotel every time. Now with this, what they would do is they were able to look at their entire hotel set every single week and quickly identify dates for given hotels where they are maybe closing out too many discounts or not enough. So what this view actually represents, this represents an entire month worth of dates for roughly 70 to 80 hotels. So what we can see here is that quickly the revenue manager would be able to identify these group of hotels and dates right here in the top left that are experiencing or projected to experience very high demand and maybe don't have enough of their discounts closed out. Over here on the right-hand side, they could find outliers for hotels that are experiencing fairly low demand but have a large number of their discounts closed out, maybe so many that they're turning away business on nights where they actually need the business. So this is useful in and of itself, but then what would happen is the revenue manager would be able to select any given date, and they would be able to see exactly what rate codes the hotel has closed out. So for example, this date on July 8th, we can see a very large number of rate codes closed out, even though the hotel is projected to be fairly low demand. So what this allowed us to do is take something that would have taken us hours to do every week and turn it into something that just takes a few minutes for the revenue manager to evaluate their set, make some notes about who to contact, and then move on to actually actioning the changes here. So the next thing that we're going to look at is a similar concept, but instead of worrying about what discounts are open or closed, this actually helps the revenue manager evaluate where the hotels are priced. So for a little bit of background here, we have an analytics pricing program every single night for every single one of our hotels. It will go out for all of their competitors, and it will shop the competitive rates online for the next 120 days. And then what it will do is it will take the hotel's forecasted demand and it will cross-reference it with the price of their competitors and make a recommended rate for the day, so a recommended price. What this visualization does here is it allows a revenue manager to look at their entire set at once for that full 120-day time period and quickly identify dates or time periods at specific hotels where they might be significantly underpriced or significantly overpriced. So in this case, this is a modified horizon graph, so we're using bars instead of area. But what this does is If a hotel is underpriced, the bar for the given date for the given hotel will be represented as orange. If they are very underpriced, they'll be represented as dark orange, and vice versa. Blue indicates an overpriced day, and dark blue indicates a very overpriced day. Each individual row here would equal to one hotel. Typically, we'd have the hotel names on the left-hand side, but we have those blanked out just for public purposes here. But what we can see here as an example is it allows a revenue manager to quickly identify hotels like the top one here that is very consistently overpriced, and then they can mouse over and they can see what the actual rate is, what we're recommending the rate is, and what their market's priced at. Down here at the bottom, we have hotels that, for the most part, are very much priced where we would recommend them to be. So as we see no bars here, this means that the price difference between what we're recommending and where they're actually priced at is very much approaching zero. But what's interesting here is they could still find opportunity days, even for hotels that are priced correctly on most dates. So here's a good example here. The hotel is priced correctly on most days, but right here we can see on a given date that they are priced roughly 32% less than what we're recommending, and over here they're priced roughly 24% less than what we're recommending. So not only does it allow the revenue managers to isolate and find opportunity hotels, but allows them to drill down even further and find opportunity dates at opportunity hotels. So again, this was something that prior to using this, we would have had to look at each hotel individually each time. And as you can see, it results in a lot of a waste of time. We would have to look at every hotel just to find that some of these ones at the bottom weren't issues. And then for the ones that were issues, we'd have to look at not just every hotel, but also every single date to find the opportunity areas. So this did result in a huge time saving for the revenue managers on a weekly basis. So those are just two examples of ones that we built. They're the ones that kind of make the most sense to people that book and stay at hotels. But again, we wound up with, instead of 2 of these, we wound up with 10 that were being updated on a weekly basis. So with Tableau Desktop, and even as we started to purchase more and more licenses of Tableau Desktop, we were still experiencing a few problems that kept us from using this as a complete solution. So we were starting to make progress, but the issues that we had was that the most pressing issue, at least, was data security. With the desktop reader model, we had to rely solely on packaged workbooks for most users. We had some cases where we couldn't allow package data to be sent, so we needed a way to control this via user login. So what would happen there is we would have data for different theaters, and we couldn't, in some cases, send data for all theaters to all users, so we had to limit that by the username. One of the other results that we've already talked about with Tableau Desktop was that there was a huge demand for reports once the hotels had seen the new reports. Previously, we used to have to really try to convince most hotels to look at and use the reports we had available for them. With Tableau, they were now actively asking for them. In fact, within 3 months of the reports being introduced to hotels, we had roughly 300 hotels asking for these reports on a weekly basis. This wasn't a problem in and of itself, but distribution of the reports quickly started becoming a pain issue with us. With Tableau Desktop, what that meant was exporting each one to a PDF and emailing these every week. So we needed a better way to distribute the reports. And resources needed to update the tools was still an issue. So even though Tableau Desktop allowed us to quite literally speed up reporting by 10 times, we were still limited by manually updating extracts each week. So after we saw such huge increases in user adoption, report efficiency, and hotel engagement, we made the decision and got approval to implement Tableau Server. So this last implementation fixed most of the outstanding issues we had. Row-level security now gave us the ability to limit the data that was accessed by the username without having to have separate extracts for each set of users. Report generation in Tableau Server was automated using tab command, so now we could generate reports for distribution without having to spend manual time and resources doing so. And best of all, the updating resources was now zero. We are now able to automate the extracts being updated on a schedule, so that way we didn't have to spend time manually doing this. So here's a breakdown of our initial implementation. We had one server distributed across 3 machines, 50 named users, and 11 extracts from the revenue optimization data mart that we had mentioned before. The 11 extracts ranged in size from the smallest one was roughly 1 million rows to the largest one being roughly 120 million rows. The dramatic results we saw were immediate. Just in the first 5 weeks of going live, we saw more than 2,000 views from users, and this was easily doubled what we saw with the other BI platforms that we'd used before. Just in the first 5 weeks, we had 75 interactive dashboards that were built with absolutely no resources needed from IT in order to build those dashboards. Most importantly, anyone in the other business groups that saw the dashboards we had access to immediately loved it and started requesting access also. So although we started with 50 named users, right now we have demand for between 75 and 100 more. That was only internal engagement, though. We quickly saw it impacting our relationship with our franchise hotels. As mentioned before, it was previously a struggle just to get hotels to view and use the reports made available to them. Once we demoed the new reports to hotels, we had more demand than we could handle. So as we mentioned, we had 300 plus hotels asking for these reports every week. In addition, the analysis we were presenting to the hotels was now more visually impactful. We started seeing a large increase in recommendations being implemented by hotels. Best of all, we were hearing back from our management companies that worked with multiple brands. They clearly put the reports above and beyond what they were getting from other places. Both the level of detail of reports and the ease of use was said to be better. We started to see previously unengaged management companies and hotels interacting more with us due to the tools we were giving them. So if you'll remember back to what our original goal was, we wanted to start providing the for-hire level of support to all of our franchise hotels. So that ties directly into the efficiency gains we made. Our data prep and formatting time for individual hotel analysis is now 0. The revenue managers are able to access the tools they need when they need them with fresh data and compelling visualizations instantly. Even better, we had a small team of 7 revenue managers able to make more than 900 proactive recommendations to franchise hotels in 3 months, and that was as of 2 months ago. By the time everything was said and done, here was the jaw-dropping result that we hadn't expected. We've now expanded the scope of our proactive consulting from something that was almost impossible to do to something that's now completed on a weekly basis for all of our franchise hotels. Even better, we did it with 0 additional staff and 0 additional cost to franchise hotels. In addition to that, we now provide thousands of generated reports distributed weekly to hotels. Our resources spent on tool building and ad hoc analysis has dropped to a small fraction of what it was before. So what we're finding is now we're still spending just as much time building the tools, but now we don't have to manually update them. So we've seen an explosion of tools made available to other users and not just that, but the tools are actually being used and we're able to track that. Even better, after implementing the Tableau project, our relationship with IT is better than it ever has been. In fact, they love the use of Tableau so much that they set up their own internal site and they use it for data governance, internal project management, and ad hoc reporting. More importantly, they're now focused more on data governance and expanding our data capabilities because they're not having to spend so much time building ad hoc reports, and we love the fact that we're not waiting for them. So even with the huge results, we're already looking ahead at next steps within our own company. We're in the process of looking at Tableau as an enterprise-wide deployment. We're working on building visualizations that can be embedded in other applications that we use. And best of all, the ease of use here has already led to demand for even more data marts being built with Tableau visualization on top of them. So we definitely don't think that our struggles and journey are unique just to us. We definitely don't think that the other hotel brands aren't exploring the same things we are. But whenever we look at the hotel industry as a whole, including management companies and individual hotels, there's a huge opportunity for the hotel industry. The combination of widespread data available and the current structure of that data makes a ripe opportunity that Tableau is a great fit for. When it comes to revenue optimization for hotel brands and as an industry, we do revenue optimization really well. Most of the brands, including us, have automated systems that generate pricing changes and rate yielding changes. Most brands have reporting available at some level for management companies and hotels, and the data and analysis is evolving quickly. But when it comes to actually visualizing and reporting on that data, we don't do such a good job as an industry. Whenever it comes to reporting available, it's mostly in rows and columns and is not very impactful. Whenever we look at analysis presentations, we see worst practices abounding everywhere. And even worse, the data that is accessible is often in silos and hard to access. So everything that we've seen today has all been revenue driven, but that's due to the nature of our department, revenue management. Management companies themselves that actually own and operate hotels have a lot to gain from the implementation of Tableau. Currently, the data they get is fragmented and changes from one brand to the next. The management companies are then forced to try to translate the data in a way that makes sense. What this leads to is segmentation that doesn't have to be there. We often see staff at management companies divided by the brands they work with. Taking these data sources and putting them together could lead to more consistent reporting and tools across different brands that benefit the actual management company instead of trying to divide it across the different brands that they use. At a hotel level, we're also seeing need for some sort of visualization solution. More and more, the revenue managers at the hotel level are being tasked with growing responsibilities and growing need to influence other departments. The more that they can reduce the time of actually building reports, the better off they'll be. This would simultaneously free them up from creating reports manually, but it would also lead to more compelling recommendations. Over and over, we see visualization with worst practices in hotel presentations. On-property revenue managers will see greater success as they're able to convince other departments to embrace strategies, and that will happen more so with better visualizations. I hope that you found this story helpful. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or would like to discuss this further.